The first time the little alien girl asked the question, it was aboard a refugee barge drifting through the outskirts of Seoul. Her voice was soft, barely audible above the hum of the failing engines, but it carried a weight that made every human on deck turn their heads. Her big, liquid dark eyes blinked up at the ship's crewman, tall, exhausted, grease-stained, and she tilted her head. "Are you my daddy?" The man froze, torn between pity and unease. He didn't know her species, didn't even know how she'd ended up among the hundreds of survivors packed into the barge. He shook his head gently, muttered, "No, kid," and turned away. The girl's small shoulders slumped, but only for a moment. She shuffled on, her fragile limbs carrying her past more humans, more strangers. Each one heard the same question. "Are you my daddy?" Each one answered the same, "No." Hashtag the lost one. Her name was Lyra, though few knew it then. She was the last surviving child of a race humanity barely remembered. Her people, the Aurelian, had once been allies, brilliant architects of crystal starships, singers of gravity songs that could calm storms on gas giants. But war had scattered them. The galactic frontier was merciless, and extinction came quietly. Lyra had no memory of her parents, no memory of her homeworld. All she had was the ache of absence and the instinct that somewhere out there, someone belonged to her. And so she asked, always asked, on mining colonies, research stations, orbital trade hubs, wherever she found humans, her small voice carried the same question. "Are you my daddy?" Some humans laughed nervously. Others grew uncomfortable. A few patted her head and moved on. None said yes. Word spread of the strange child. Some whispered she was broken, her mind fractured by trauma. Others said she was a symbol of something larger, the loneliness that bound all refugees together. But to Lyra it was simple. She asked because one day she believed she would find the right answer. Hashtag a human named Kael. Years passed. Lyra grew, though slower than a human child. Her body remained small, her eyes too large for her face, her skin faintly luminous in the dark. She wandered from one human outpost to the next, carried along by charity or circumstance. On New Perseus Station, a sprawling human-built hub on the edge of Orion's arm, Lyra found herself once again wandering the docking bays. Her voice had grown quieter over the years, her question spoken with less certainty. That day, she asked it of a man named Kael Arden. Kael was no hero. He was a cargo pilot with debts piled high enough to bury him. His ship, the Rustwing, barely held together between jumps. He was lean, tired, and bitter, haunted by the war that had taken his wife years ago, and the child they'd never had. Lyra tugged at his sleeve as he unloaded crates. "Are you my daddy?" Kael froze. He looked down at her, expecting to see the same wide-eyed desperation he'd seen in orphans before. Instead, her gaze was steady, unwavering, almost certain. "No, kid," he said after a pause, voice rough. "I'm not your dad." She nodded, as if she'd expected the answer. But then she did something unusual. She sat on the crate beside him, folding her spindly legs, and simply waited. Kael tried to ignore her, but she didn't move. Hours passed. Finally he muttered, "Why keep asking that? Don't you get tired of hearing no?" Lyra looked at him with those fathomless eyes. One day, someone will say yes. The words lodged in Kael's chest like a blade. Hashtag shadows of war. Kael didn't intend to keep the girl. But Lyra had a way of slipping past walls. She helped him with small tasks, sorting manifests, carrying tools, humming softly as she worked. The Rustwing was a lonely ship, its corridors filled with the echo of Kael's regrets. Lyra's presence was a quiet balm. She asked fewer strangers her question now, saving it for the rare moments when she looked at Kael directly. One night, as the stars blurred past the viewport, she asked again, "Are you my daddy?" Kael should have said no. He almost did. But the word stuck in his throat. He saw his wife's face in Lyra's innocent gaze, saw the child they dreamed of. I don't know," he whispered instead. Lyra smiled faintly. For the first time, she didn't look disappointed. But the galaxy was not kind. The frontier burned with conflict. Raiders, mercenary guilds, and remnants of old wars. Kael's debts caught up to him. A syndicate demanded repayment he couldn't give. When he tried to run, they hunted him. One desperate night, the Rustwing was boarded. Kael fought with everything he had, but he was outnumbered. Lyra, hidden in the engine crawlspace, listened to the chaos. When silence finally fell, Kael was bleeding on the deck, a blaster aimed at his head. The syndicate captain sneered. "Last words, pilot." Kael's gaze flicked to the shadows where Lyra hid. He thought of her question. Thought of all the times he'd failed to answer. "Yes," he rasped. "I'm her father." The captain frowned, confused, but Kael didn't care. His body sagged, strength fading. He whispered louder, as if Lyra could hear him. "I'm your daddy." A scream tore through the ship. Not from Kael, not from the raiders, but from Lyra. Her voice wasn't just sound. It was resonance, a harmonic wail that shook the hull. The Aurelians had once wielded sound as power, and in Lyra that legacy awoke. The raiders staggered, clutching their ears as the Rustwing trembled. Panels burst, lights shattered. Kael felt the vibration in his bones. And then silence. When Kael opened his eyes again, the raiders were gone, fled or unconscious. Lyra stood before him, trembling, her eyes glowing faintly. "You said yes," she whispered. He reached out with a bloodied hand, touched her shoulder. "Yes," he said again. "I'm your daddy." #### becoming a family. From that day everything changed. Kael stopped running from the title. He called Lyra his daughter openly, fiercely, daring anyone to question it. She, in turn, clung to him not as a wandering child searching anymore, but as someone who had finally found her place. They struggled. The debts didn't vanish, and enemies still lurked. But word spread. Whispers of a human pilot and his strange alien daughter. Inseparable, unbreakable. Some laughed, some scorned, but many admired. Lyra grew, and with her growth came strength. She learned to harness her people's resonance, shaping vibrations into shields, songs that could soothe or shatter. Kael taught her human things. How to fly, how to barter, how to curse when the hyperdrive failed. Together, they carved out a life in the vast emptiness. #### The test of belonging. Years later, the frontier faced a new threat, a warlord who sought to enslave the scattered refugee races. His fleet descended on New Perseus Station, the same place where Kael and Lyra had first met. Kael knew they couldn't run. The warlord's fleet was too large. But Lyra stood tall, no longer a small lost child, but a young woman with a voice that carried the legacy of a people. "I can stop them," she said, her tone calm. Kael's blood ran cold. "No, I won't let you throw your life away." She smiled softly, the same way she had all those years ago when she first sat on his crate. "You said yes, remember? Daddies protect their daughters. But daughters protect their daddies too." And before he could stop her, she stepped onto the station's broadcast deck.